The dust swirled across the platform as the train's whistle pierced the afternoon air, announcing its arrival to Nogales, Arizona, with a shrill finality that made Nora Sullivan's heart pound against her ribcage. It was May 1885, and the western frontier still held as many promises as it did dangers for a woman traveling alone. Clutching her single valise with white-knuckled determination, she descended the iron steps onto unfamiliar ground, her emerald traveling dress marking her as an outsider among the weathered faces of the desert town. The station was smaller than she had envisioned in her countless daydreams during the long journey from Philadelphia. Nora's gaze darted around the platform, searching for the face of Vincent Yates, the rancher whose advertisement for a wife had brought her across the country. His letters, filled with practical details about his ranch and the need for a woman's touch in raising his daughter, had painted him as a decent, hard-working man. Not a romantic, perhaps, but reliable, which was far more valuable than poetry to a 24-year-old woman with no family and dwindling prospects in the East. But Vincent Yates was nowhere to be seen. A moment of panic seized her as she contemplated the possibility that he had changed his mind, leaving her stranded in this dusty border town. Just as the last passengers disembarked and the platform began to clear, Nora spotted a young girl, no more than 10 years old, standing apart from the dwindling crowd. She wore a simple calico dress, her dark hair tied in practical braids, and her eyes knowing beyond her years fixed directly on Nora. The girl approached with confident steps. "Miss Sullivan?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady for a child. Nora nodded, relief washing over her. "Yes, that's me." The girl's face brightened with a smile that transformed her serious demeanor. "I'm Lucy Yates. We've been waiting for you." Nora glanced around, expecting to see Vincent Yates materialize from the thinning crowd. "Pa couldn't come," Lucy explained, taking hold of Nora's free hand with the casual familiarity of childhood. "The spring roundup is happening, and he's short-handed this year. He sent me with Mr. Donovan to fetch you." She gestured toward a weathered-looking man who stood beside a wagon at the edge of the platform. He tipped his hat respectfully but remained by the horses. "I see," Nora replied, trying to mask her disappointment. She had prepared herself for an awkward first meeting with her future husband, but his absence left her feeling adrift. "It's very nice to meet you, Lucy." "Pa says you're going to be my new mother," Lucy said matter-of-factly, leading Nora toward the wagon. "My real mother died when I was 4. I don't remember her much." The bluntness of the child's statement caught Nora off guard. I hope we can be friends first, Lucy," she managed to say. Lucy considered this with a thoughtful expression. "I suppose that's sensible. Pa says you're from Philadelphia. Is that near the ocean?" As they reached the wagon, Mr. Donovan, a man of few words, took Nora's valise and secured it before helping her onto the wooden bench. Lucy scrambled up beside her with the agility of youth. "It's about an hour to the ranch," Lucy informed her as Mr. Donovan clicked to the horses. "Pa has the biggest cattle ranch this side of the Santa Cruz River. Not as big as some up north, but Pa says it's quality, not quantity, that counts." As the wagon pulled away from the station, Nora caught a last glimpse of the train that had carried her from her old life. There would be no going back now, not without enduring shame and destitution. The realization settled on her shoulders like a physical weight. "Are you afraid, Miss Sullivan?" Lucy asked, studying Nora's face with unnerving perception. Nora considered lying but found she couldn't. "A little," she admitted. "It's a very big change." Lucy nodded sagely. "Pa was afraid too when he decided to send for a wife. I heard him tell Mr. Donovan that he wasn't sure he remembered how to talk to a lady anymore." She leaned in conspiratorially. but he's been cleaning up the house for weeks, and he even bought a new shirt." Despite her nervousness, Nora found herself smiling at the child's candor. That was very thoughtful of him. The landscape unfolded around them as they traveled, rocky outcroppings giving way to stretches of desert, dotted with cacti and scrub. The vastness of the open country both awed and intimidated Nora, so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and the mountains in the distance were tinged with purple. "There's water on the ranch," Lucy continued, apparently appointed as the official welcoming committee. "A good spring that never runs dry, even in summer. And Pa built a proper house, not just a cabin. It has 3 rooms and a real wooden floor." She said this with unmistakable pride. Nora listened, trying to picture the home that awaited her. Her correspondence with Vincent Yates had been practical rather than personal. He had written of needing a partner to help manage the household and raise his daughter, offering security and respect in return. It wasn't the romantic dream Nora had harbored in her youth, but those fantasies had withered years ago under the harsh reality of her parents' deaths, and the subsequent years of working as a companion to a demanding elderly relative. "Pa says you're a teacher," Lucy said, interrupting Nora's thoughts. "I was," Nora confirmed. "I taught at a girls' school in Philadelphia for 3 years." Lucy's eyes widened. "Will you teach me? There's a school in town, but it's too far to go every day." "Pa teaches me some, but he says he doesn't know enough for a growing mind." "I'd be happy to," Nora said, touched by the eagerness in the girl's voice. Teaching had been one of the few joys in her life before her employer's death had left her without a position or home. Mr. Donovan, who had been silent throughout the journey, finally spoke. "Yates is a good man, Miss Sullivan. Fair and honest. Works harder than most. The girl's right, he's been nervous as a cat about your arrival." His words were clearly meant to reassure her, and Nora appreciated the effort. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan. I'm looking forward to meeting him." The rest of the journey passed with Lucy pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about ranch life. Despite her fatigue from days of travel, Nora found herself increasingly curious about the man she had agreed to marry. Vincent Yates's letters had been straightforward, even terse, but the picture emerging from his daughter's chatter was of a devoted father who worked hard to provide for his child. As the wagon crested a small rise, Lucy bounced excitedly on the seat. "There it is. That's our ranch." Below them spread a modest but well-kept property. A substantial log house with a covered porch stood near a barn and several outbuildings. A corral held horses, and in the distance, Nora could see cattle grazing. A stream wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided a welcome splash of green in the arid landscape. "It's lovely," Nora said truthfully, some of her anxiety easing at the sight of the orderly ranch. As they approached the house, Nora noticed a tall figure emerge from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. Even at a distance, she could see he was watching the wagon's approach with an intensity that made her straighten her posture and smooth her travel-rumpled skirts. "That's Pa," Lucy exclaimed, waving enthusiastically. Mr. Donovan brought the wagon to a halt near the house, and Vincent Yates approached. He was taller than Nora had imagined, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair streaked with gold from the sun. His face was weathered but not unkind, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than he frowned. As he drew closer, Nora saw that his eyes were a startling shade of blue, currently filled with a mixture of apprehension and something that might have been hope. "Miss Sullivan," he said, removing his hat. "Welcome to Yates Ranch. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." His voice was deeper than she had expected, with a slight roughness that spoke of a man more accustomed to giving orders to ranch hands than engaging in social conversation. "Thank you, Mr. Yates," Nora replied, finding her own voice steady despite her nerves. "It was long but uneventful. Your daughter has been an excellent guide for the final leg." Lucy beamed at the praise, and Vincent's expression softened as he glanced at his daughter. "She's been counting the days till your arrival." Mr. Donovan helped Nora down from the wagon, and for a moment, an awkward silence fell over the group. They were strangers bound by an agreement made through letters, and the reality of their situation seemed to hit all of them at once. Lucy, apparently immune to the tension, broke the silence. "Can I show Miss Sullivan her room, Pa? I helped fix it up special." Vincent nodded, visibly relieved at having a concrete task to focus on. "Of course. Mr. Donovan and I will bring in her things." "I imagine you're tired from your journey, Miss Sullivan." "A little," Nora admitted, "but I'm also quite interested in seeing my new home." That earned her a small smile from Vincent, a flash of warmth that transformed his serious face. "Lucy's been working hard to prepare for your arrival. I hope you'll find everything satisfactory." As Lucy led her toward the house, Nora felt Vincent's gaze following them. This man, this stranger, was to be her husband. The thought was both terrifying and oddly compelling. She had made her choice when she boarded the train in Philadelphia, driven by necessity as much as hope. Now, stepping onto the porch of what would become her home, Nora Sullivan resolved to face her new life with the same determination that had carried her across the country. Inside, the house was simple but surprisingly comfortable. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a sturdy table, several chairs, a cookstove, and a stone fireplace. Shelves held books more than she would have expected, and the floors were indeed wooden, covered in places with woven rugs. "This is your room," Lucy announced, leading Nora to a door off the main room. "It used to be Pa's, but he's moved to the lean-to off the back, so you can have the proper bedroom." Nora felt a stab of guilt at displacing Vincent from his room, but was touched by the gesture. The bedroom was small but clean, with a neatly made bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a chest of drawers. A small window let in the late afternoon light, and someone, Lucy, most likely had placed a bunch of wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill. "It's lovely," Nora said sincerely. "Did you make the quilt?" Lucy shook her head. "That was my mother's work. Pa kept it special, but I did the flowers and I helped sweep and dust." "You've done a wonderful job," Nora assured her, touched by the child's efforts. Vincent and Mr. Donovan entered with Nora's valise and trunk. Vincent set them down carefully, his movements controlled as if afraid of disrupting the space. "I'll leave you to get settled," he said. "Supper will be ready in about an hour if that suits you." "That would be perfect, thank you." After they left, closing the door behind them, Nora sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the finality of her decision. The long journey, the strange surroundings, and the knowledge that she was now committed to a life with a man she had just met hit her all at once. But as she looked around at the room prepared for her with obvious care, she felt a small flicker of hope. Perhaps this arrangement, born of pragmatism rather than passion, could still lead to happiness. She unpacked only what she needed for the evening, washing away the dust of travel as best she could with the water provided. Changing into a clean blue dress, one of her best, Nora brushed and repinned her auburn hair before taking a deep breath and rejoining her new family. In the main room, Vincent was placing a pot on the table while Lucy set out plates and utensils. He had changed into a clean shirt, she noticed, and his hair was damp, as if he had washed up as well. "I hope you like stew," he said as she entered. It's not fancy cooking, but it's hot and filling. It smells wonderful, Nora assured him, moving to help Lucy with the table settings. I'm afraid I'm not an accomplished cook myself, but I'm willing to learn. Vincent looked relieved. Lucy and I have been managing, but neither of us has much skill in the kitchen. My late wife, Margaret, was a fine cook. He hesitated, as if unsure whether mentioning his first wife was appropriate. Perhaps you could tell me what dishes she made that you and Lucy enjoyed, Nora suggested gently. I'd like to try my hand at them. The tension in Vincent's shoulders eased slightly. She made a venison stew that Lucy still talks about. Pa shot a deer last winter, Lucy chimed in. He's a good hunter. The conversation flowed more easily as they sat down to eat, primarily thanks to Lucy's endless questions about Philadelphia and Nora's life there. Vincent spoke little, but Nora noticed he listened intently, his eyes often finding hers across the table. After the meal, Lucy reluctantly went to bed following a gentle reminder from her father. Once they were alone, the awkwardness returned, hanging in the air between them. I should be honest with you, Miss Sullivan, Vincent finally said, his hands clasped before him on the table. I'm not much for conversation or fancy manners. Life out here doesn't allow for it. But I meant what I wrote in my letters. I'll provide for you and treat you with respect. Nora met his gaze steadily. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Yates. I didn't come here expecting romance from a dime novel. I came seeking a home and purpose. I hope I can be a good wife to you and a friend to Lucy. Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, relief, perhaps, or appreciation for her practical outlook. Lucy's already half in love with you. As for me, he paused, clearly searching for the right words. I believe we can build something good here if we're both willing to try. It wasn't a declaration of love, but Nora hadn't expected one. It was an offer of partnership, of mutual respect and effort. For now, that was enough. I am willing, she said simply. Vincent nodded, a small smile touching his lips. Then we have a starting point. He rose from the table. You must be tired. We can continue our discussion tomorrow. Yes, thank you. Good night, Mr. Yates. Vincent, he corrected her. If we're to be married, you should use my given name. Vincent, she repeated, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. And I'm Nora, he nodded again. Good night, Nora. As she prepared for bed in her new room, Nora reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she had been facing a future of uncertainty in Philadelphia. Now she was preparing to marry a rancher in Arizona territory. A man she barely knew, but whose quiet strength and devotion to his daughter had already made an impression on her. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself. But as she drifted off to sleep to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night, Nora Sullivan found herself cautiously optimistic about what tomorrow might bring. The morning sun streamed through the small window, waking Nora from the deepest sleep she'd experienced in weeks. For a moment, disorientation gripped her as she stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, but then the events of the previous day rushed back. She was in Nogales, at the Yates Ranch, preparing to begin her new life. The smell of coffee and the sound of quiet conversation drew her from her room after she'd dressed in a practical brown skirt and white blouse. Vincent and Lucy were already at the table, Lucy chattering away while Vincent listened with obvious affection. Good morning, Nora greeted them, smoothing her hair self-consciously. Vincent stood immediately. Good morning. I hope you slept well. Better than I have in quite some time, thank you. Lucy grinned at her. Pa made breakfast. He only knows how to make flapjacks, but they're good. Vincent looked slightly embarrassed. They're nothing special, but they'll fill you up. The flapjacks were indeed simple but hearty, drizzled with molasses that Lucy informed her came from a trading post near the Mexican border. As they ate, Vincent outlined the day ahead. I need to ride out to check on some calves born last night, he explained. And then there's fencing to repair on the north section. I should be back by mid-afternoon. Nora nodded. I thought I might familiarize myself with the house today, perhaps start taking inventory of what supplies we have. That would be helpful, Vincent agreed. And Lucy can show you around the immediate area of the ranch if you'd like, he hesitated. About our arrangement. The justice of the peace comes through Nogales every other Sunday. He'll be there this weekend. I thought if you're willing, we could be married then. His direct approach, without pretense or forced romance, was actually comforting to Nora. That seems sensible, she replied. It will give us a few days to become better acquainted. Relief flickered across Vincent's face. Good, that's good. He stood, placing his hat on his head. I'll see you both later, then. After he left, Lucy helped Nora clear the breakfast dishes, then eagerly offered to give her a tour of the ranch buildings. Pa said not to take you too far, Lucy explained as they stepped outside into the bright morning sunshine. But we can see the barn and the chicken coop and the spring house. The tour revealed a well-maintained property that spoke of Vincent's hard work and careful planning. The barn housed several horses, including a gentle mare that Lucy informed her would be hers to ride once she learned how. Pa says every rancher's wife needs her own horse, Lucy said matter-of-factly. This is Willow. She's sweet-tempered and doesn't spook easy. Nora, who had only ridden a handful of times in her life, regarded the mare with a mixture of interest and trepidation. She's beautiful. I'll need some lessons before I'm ready to ride her, though. Pa can teach you, Lucy assured her. He's patient with beginners. He taught me to ride when I was only 5. Throughout the morning, Lucy continued to share tidbits about life on the ranch and about her father. Through the child's innocent chatter, Nora began to form a clearer picture of Vincent Yates, a man who worked from dawn to dusk, who read to his daughter every night no matter how tired he was, who had kept his wife's memory alive for Lucy, while somehow managing to raise her alone in this rugged country. By midday, Nora had taken stock of the kitchen supplies and begun to organize a simple meal from what was available. Lucy, eager to help, showed her where everything was kept and explained their usual routines. Pa usually does the cooking, but he's not very good at it, she confided. Sometimes Mrs. Rodriguez from town brings us tamales or enchiladas. She says Pa and I would waste away without her. Well, I hope to improve our meals, Nora said, smiling at the girl's candor, though I'll need to learn about the local ingredients. They spent the afternoon indoors as the heat intensified, with Nora unpacking her belongings, and Lucy showing her a piece of embroidery she was working on. Nora was pleased to discover that the girl had a quick mind and was already reading at a level beyond her years, thanks to Vincent's efforts. Pa says books can take you places even if your body stays put, Lucy explained, showing Nora a small shelf of well-worn volumes. He reads a lot in winter when there's less work. True to his word, Vincent returned in the late afternoon, dusty from his day's work but with a satisfied expression that suggested the tasks had gone well. He paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of Nora and Lucy seated at the table, heads bent over a book. Everything all right here? He asked. Lucy jumped up. Miss Sullivan's been teaching me about geography. Pa, did you know that in Philadelphia the snow sometimes gets taller than me in winter? Vincent's eyes met Nora's over his daughter's head. Is that so? Sounds mighty cold to me. It can be, Nora agreed, rising from her chair. But it has its own beauty, just as the desert does. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that they were both making an effort to bridge the vast differences in their backgrounds and experiences. The evening passed pleasantly, with the simple meal Nora had prepared receiving appreciative comments from both Vincent and Lucy. After Lucy went to bed, Nora and Vincent sat at the table with cups of coffee, the lamplight casting a warm glow over the room. "Lucy seems to have taken to you," Vincent observed, his voice low to avoid waking his daughter. "She's a wonderful child," Nora replied sincerely. "You've done an admirable job raising her on your own." Vincent stared into his coffee cup. "I've done my best, but a girl needs a mother's guidance. That's why." He trailed off, then looked up to meet her eyes. "I want you to know that I don't expect more from this arrangement than you're willing to give. We'll be husband and wife in name, but if you need time before." He cleared his throat awkwardly. Nora felt a flush rise to her cheeks at his implied meaning but appreciated his consideration. "Thank you for your understanding. I think it would be best if we take time to become comfortable with each other first." Vincent nodded, relief evident in his expression. "I agree. This is strange territory for both of us." The next few days fell into a rhythm that allowed Nora to gradually acclimate to ranch life. Each morning, Vincent would leave after breakfast to tend to the cattle and the myriad other tasks required to maintain the ranch. Nora would spend her mornings organizing the household and afternoons giving Lucy lessons or learning from the girl about local plants and customs. Vincent returned each evening, clearly making an effort to finish his work earlier than had been his habit before Nora's arrival. Their conversations grew less stilted as they discovered shared interests, a love of reading, a dry sense of humor that surprised and delighted Nora, and a mutual commitment to providing Lucy with both education and practical skills. By the time Sunday arrived, Nora had developed a genuine respect for Vincent Yates. His quiet strength and unwavering dedication to his responsibilities spoke more eloquently than flowery words ever could. She wasn't in love with him, not yet, but she could envision a future where such feelings might grow. The journey into Nogales for their wedding was undertaken in the wagon, with Lucy dressed in her Sunday best and chattering excitedly about the rare trip to town. Nora wore her finest dress, a deep green silk that she had carefully packed for this very occasion, and had pinned a sprig of desert wildflowers to her hair. The town was busier than it had been on her arrival, with people gathered for Sunday services and socializing. Vincent guided them to a small building that served as the justice's temporary office, his hand occasionally touching the small of Nora's back in a gesture that felt both protective and reassuring. The ceremony itself was brief and straightforward, witnessed by Lucy, Mr. Donovan, and a few curious townspeople who had heard about the mail-order bride from Philadelphia. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent hesitated only briefly before leaning down to place a gentle, almost tentative kiss on Nora's lips there first. The unexpected tenderness of the gesture sent a flutter through Nora's stomach. Vincent's eyes, when he pulled away, held a question that she wasn't yet ready to answer. After the ceremony, Vincent surprised her by leading them to the town's only hotel, where he had arranged for a proper wedding meal. Several of his neighbors and business associates joined them, including the Rodriguez family that Lucy had mentioned, who brought a beautiful cake as a wedding gift. "Welcome to Nogales, Mrs. Yates," Mrs. Rodriguez said warmly, embracing Nora. "This one," she added, nodding toward Vincent, "he needs someone to soften those rough edges. And the child, she needs a mother's touch." "I'll do my best," Nora promised, touched by the woman's genuine welcome. Throughout the meal, Nora observed Vincent interacting with his neighbors and was impressed by the obvious respect they showed him. He wasn't a man who sought the spotlight, but when he spoke, others listened. Occasionally, his eyes would find hers across the table, and he would offer a small smile that made her feel included despite being new to the community. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Lucy, exhausted from the excitement, fell asleep almost immediately after they arrived home, leaving Nora and Vincent alone for the first time as husband and wife. An awkward silence fell between them as they stood in the main room, the reality of their new status suddenly overwhelming. "I meant what I said before," Vincent finally spoke, his voice low and careful. "There's no rush for anything. I can continue sleeping in the lean-to until you're comfortable with other arrangements." Nora appreciated his consideration, but recognized that they needed to move forward if they were ever to build a true marriage. "I think, as husband and wife, we should share a room," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I would be grateful if we could. Take things slowly." Vincent's expression softened with what might have been relief. "Of course. Whatever pace you're comfortable with, Nora." That night, they shared the bedroom that had been Nora's alone for the past week. Vincent was meticulous about giving her privacy to prepare for bed, and when he finally joined her, he kept to his side of the mattress, careful not to crowd her. "Good night, Mrs. Yates," he said softly in the darkness. "Good night." "Husband," Nora replied, testing the word and finding it less strange on her tongue than she had expected. As spring gave way to the intense heat of summer in southern Arizona, Nora gradually adapted to life as a rancher's wife. The days were long and often physically demanding, but she found satisfaction in the tangible results of her labor, a well-organized household. The garden she had started with Lucy's eager assistance, the increasingly comfortable meals she prepared, as she learned to use local ingredients. Vincent proved to be a patient teacher as he helped her learn to ride Willow, his hands steady and respectful as he guided her through the basics of horsemanship. Nora discovered an unexpected freedom in being able to explore the ranch on horseback, often accompanying Lucy on short rides to collect wildflowers or visit particularly beautiful spots on the property. Their physical relationship progressed slowly but steadily. What began as a chaste sharing of space evolved into tentative touches, then more deliberate embraces. Nora was surprised to discover that Vincent, for all his practical exterior, could be remarkably gentle and attentive. The first time they truly came together as husband and wife, nearly a month after their wedding, it was Nora who initiated the deeper intimacy, reaching for him in the darkness with a certainty that had been building for weeks. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt his heartbeat gradually slow beneath her cheek. "I never expected this," he confessed, his voice a low rumble in the darkness. "When I sent that advertisement east, I hoped for a practical arrangement, someone to help with Lucy and the household. I never thought I'd find someone like you." "What am I like?" Nora asked, curious about how he saw her. Vincent's hand stroked her hair gently. "Strong, smart, kind to Lucy without trying to replace her mother. Beautiful," he added, a hint of bashfulness in his voice. "More than I deserve." The simple honesty of his words touched Nora deeply. "I think we may have both gotten more than we bargained for," she replied, pressing a kiss to his chest. As summer progressed, Nora found herself increasingly integrated into the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to identify the sounds of the desert at night, to predict storms by the smell in the air, to preserve food for the winter months ahead. Lucy blossomed under her guidance, excelling in her lessons and confiding in Nora in ways that suggested she was beginning to see her as more than just her father's wife. Vincent, too, seemed to be flourishing with a partner to share his burdens. He smiled more often, laughed at Lucy's jokes, and occasionally even sang old trail songs when he thought no one was listening. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, with a successful cattle drive in late summer bringing enough profit to make some long-needed improvements to the property. It was during the relative calm following the cattle drive that Nora realized she had fallen in love with her husband. The knowledge didn't come as a lightning strike, but as a quiet certainty one evening as she watched Vincent reading to Lucy by lamplight, his deep voice bringing the adventures on the page to life for his enraptured daughter. This man, this quiet, steadfast rancher who had advertised for a practical arrangement and instead opened his heart to love again, had become essential to her happiness in ways she had never anticipated. That night, after Lucy was asleep, Nora told him, the words simple but heartfelt. "I love you, Vincent. I didn't expect to, but I do." In the lamplight, she saw his eyes widen with surprise before his face transformed with a smile more brilliant than any she had yet witnessed. "Nora," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've been loving you for weeks but was afraid to say it. Afraid you might feel obligated to return the sentiment." "There's no obligation in my heart," she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "Only love." Their kiss sealed a transformation from an arrangement of convenience to a union of hearts freely given. The first significant challenge to their newfound happiness came in early autumn, when a group of cattle rustlers began targeting ranches in the area. Vincent, as one of the more successful ranchers, found himself helping to organize the community's response. "They've hit the Rodriguez place and the Millers," he explained to Nora one evening. "We're forming a patrol rotation. I'll need to take my turn." Nora couldn't help the flutter of fear in her chest. Is it dangerous? Vincent didn't insult her intelligence with false reassurances. It could be. These men aren't likely to surrender without a fight. But there's safety in numbers, and the sheriff from Tucson is sending deputies to help. For 3 nights, Vincent rode with the patrol, leaving Nora to manage the ranch and comfort Lucy, who shared her worries. On the 4th night, gunfire echoed in the distance, sending Nora into a state of barely controlled panic as she waited for news. It was nearly dawn when the sound of horses approaching brought her running onto the porch, Lucy close behind. The sight of Vincent, dirty and exhausted but whole, dismounting from his horse brought tears of relief to her eyes. "It's over," he told them, accepting Nora's fierce embrace. "We caught them trying to move a herd across the border. 2 of their gang were killed in the fight, but none of our men were seriously hurt. The sheriff has the rest in custody." That night, holding Vincent close in their bed, Nora confronted the depth of her feelings. "I was so afraid of losing you," she whispered against his neck. "I never thought I could feel this way about anyone." Vincent's arms tightened around her. "When the shooting started, all I could think about was getting home to you and Lucy. You've given me so much more to live for than I had before." As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures to the desert, Nora made an important discovery. The persistent morning sickness and fatigue that had plagued her for weeks had a joyful explanation. She was expecting a child. When she shared the news with Vincent, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach, and when he looked up at her, there were tears in his eyes. "A baby," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Our baby." Lucy, when told she would be a big sister, responded with typical enthusiasm, immediately peppering Nora with questions about the baby's arrival and offering to help prepare for the new addition. The winter months passed in a haze of contentment for Nora, despite the physical discomforts of pregnancy. The ranch house, which had seemed merely adequate when she first arrived, now felt truly like home. She and Vincent expanded their small library, reading together in the evenings while Lucy worked on increasingly complex embroidery projects under Nora's guidance. The community embraced Nora completely, with the women of nearby ranches offering advice and support for her pregnancy. Mrs. Rodriguez became a particular friend, teaching Nora traditional remedies for morning sickness and helping her adapt her clothing as her body changed. Spring brought new calves to the ranch and advancing preparations for the baby. Vincent and Mr. Donovan built a cradle, working in the evenings by lamplight, while Nora and Lucy sewed tiny garments from soft fabric ordered from Tucson. It was on a perfect May day, exactly 1 year after Nora had stepped off the train in Nogales, that their son was born. The labor was difficult but mercifully not prolonged, with Mrs. Rodriguez and the midwife from town guiding Nora through the process, while Vincent paced anxiously outside. When Vincent was finally allowed to enter the bedroom, his eyes immediately found Nora, pale but triumphant, holding a small bundle wrapped in the blanket Lucy had helped to make. "Come meet your son," Nora said softly, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the joy of the moment. Vincent approached almost reverently, sinking onto the edge of the bed. When Nora placed the infant in his arms, his hands, so capable with horses and cattle, were gentle as they cradled his child. "He's perfect," Vincent whispered, studying the tiny face with its shock of dark hair. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one. Now, looking at her husband holding their child, Nora knew. "William," she suggested, "after your father." Vincent looked up, surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "William Yates," he tested the name, then nodded. "A good, strong name." Lucy was allowed in shortly after, her eyes wide with wonder as she met her baby brother. "He's so small," she marveled. "But Pa says he's strong like you." "Like all of us," Nora corrected gently. "The Yates family is made of strong stuff." As she looked at the 3 people gathered around her bed, the husband she had come to love deeply, the stepdaughter who had captured her heart from their first meeting, and the newborn son who represented their shared future, Nora felt a contentment that far surpassed anything she could have imagined when she'd made the decision to answer a stranger's advertisement a year earlier. Life in the Arizona territory was not easy. There would be droughts and floods, illness and injury, conflicts and challenges in the years ahead. But Nora knew with absolute certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. This family forged not from obligation, but from love freely given and gratefully received. That evening, with baby William sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Vincent joined Nora on the porch to watch the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. He slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her close against his side. "Are you happy, Mrs. Yates?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of lingering wonder that this life was truly theirs. Nora leaned into his embrace, thinking of the lonely woman who had stepped off a train 1 year ago and the fulfilled wife and mother she had become. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she answered truthfully. Vincent pressed a kiss to her temple. "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I was hoping for help with Lucy and the household. I never expected to find my heart again. And I never expected to find a home where there was only a house on a map," Nora replied. "But here we are." "Here we are," Vincent agreed, tightening his arm around her as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. 5 years passed, bringing both challenges and joys to the Yates family. The ranch prospered under Vincent and Nora's combined management, growing to become one of the more successful operations in the area. William grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. 2 years after his birth, he was joined by a sister, Margaret, named for Vincent's first wife in a gesture that demonstrated Nora's security in her husband's love. Lucy, at 15, had blossomed into a poised young woman who excelled in her studies at the proper school in Tucson, where she now boarded during the school year. Her letters home were filled with academic accomplishments and social observations that made Vincent both proud and wistful for the little girl who had once greeted a stranger at the train station. Nogales itself had grown, with the railroad bringing more settlers and commerce to the area. The border town maintained its frontier character, but now boasted several stores, a small hotel, and even a schoolhouse where Nora occasionally taught when the regular teacher needed assistance. On a warm spring evening, as they sat on the expanded porch of their home, which now featured additional rooms for their growing family, Nora watched Vincent playing a game with William while baby Margaret dozed in her lap. "You ever think about that day at the train station?" she asked, a reminiscent smile playing on her lips. Vincent looked up from the checkerboard. "The day Lucy found you before I could, I think about it often." "I was so frightened," Nora admitted, standing there alone wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Vincent rose and came to sit beside her on the porch swing, his arm settling comfortably around her shoulders. "And now?" Nora leaned against him, contentment washing through her. "Now I know it was the best decision I ever made. The train brought me to exactly where I was meant to be." Vincent's kiss was as tender as it was familiar, a physical manifestation of the deep bond they had forged from such uncertain beginnings. As the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues around them, Nora Sullivan Yates gave silent thanks for the courage that had brought her west and the love that had made it home. In the distance, the whistle of an approaching train echoed across the landscape, the same sound that had once heralded her arrival to this strange, beautiful land. Now, it was simply part of the backdrop of a life richer and more fulfilling than she could ever have imagined when she stepped off that train alone, a mail-order bride met by a cowboy's daughter with the life-changing words, "We've been waiting for you."